does my right honourable friend agree that this is a grotesque overreach by the ICC? Courts must also act within the rule of law, and the jurisdiction of a court is something that it is not for itself to judge. The Statute of Rome, which set up the International Criminal Court, clearly delineated the powers of the court. The US and the UK have both previously said that the ICC does not have jurisdiction. Under its founding charter, it can only act against a sovereign state, which is a signatory. The US and Israel are not signatories. Dozens of other countries are not signatories, and Gaza is not a sovereign state. So, putting aside for a moment any purported evidence, the court does not have jurisdiction, and like any other court, like a traffic court or a magistrate's court, it has to act within its powers, the powers set up for it by the international community. So isn't it true that the ICC is acting out with its powers and setting itself up, sadly, as a political court?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I made clear what our position is towards the ICC, but in respect of what my right honourable and learned friend says, I think that many people will agree with what Benny Gantz said this morning. And he said the following: placing the leaders of a country that went into battle to protect its civilians in the same line with bloodthirsty terrorists is moral blindness.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, facts are important, and the facts have not changed since October the 7th, which is that it is Hamas who embed themselves in civilian areas and use civilian infrastructures and put their own people at risk in this conflict. It is Hamas who have committed rapes as a weapon of war. It is Hamas who are still holding innocent civilians hostages, and it is Hamas who went into Israeli communities on October the 7th and butchered 1,200 people, including slicing the breasts of women and the limbs of children. On the other side, we have the democratic, liberal state of Israel with an independent judicial process, a Supreme Court which is respected internationally and which the ICC is supposed to respect, and yet there are people in here who from day one have done very little to call out some of the other behaviour and everything to hold Israel to a standard they do not hold others to. That is why the Czech Prime Minister and the...
Can you... Please, can everybody focus on a question? Focus on a question. Because I'm not quite sure I heard a question there, but nonetheless, I think the Minister has had enough to respond. Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend speaks with great passion and feeling on this subject, and he, I think, will be one of those who, I said, might well agree with what Benny Gantz has said this morning, and I read into the record exactly what he said, and I think there will be large numbers of people, both in this place and outside, who will think that what Benny Gantz said made a lot of sense.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The Cyprus Maritime Corridor is welcome, but it risks acting as a fig leaf.
I think there's a danger from the scope and the timing of the ICC arrest warrants that somehow moral equivalence might be implied, but it is quite clear that the fighting should stop. Can I please ask the Minister what he thinks the impact will be of those warrants?
Well, my honourable friend makes a most interesting point. This smacks of an unworthy, indeed ludicrous, sense of moral equivalence between a murderous, prescribed terrorist organisation and the democratically elected government of Israel, seeking to protect its citizens and recover its 124 remaining hostages.
In general, I am a strong supporter of the work of the ICC. The terrorist attack was undoubtedly designed to provoke an overreaction by the Israelis and to polarize societies, and it has succeeded in both those aims. May I encourage the Minister to encourage the House in turn to read the ICC's statement in full. It's helpfully available online. And may I urge people with a partisan view on either side of this atrocious issue to take on board seriously what the ICC is saying about the activities of the side they support as well as the side they oppose.
Mr. Speaker, I think my right honourable friend makes a good point about ensuring that the debate is informed by facts and not by rhetoric.
Draws attention to the false moral equivalence inherent in the ICC statement between the actions of sovereign democratic Israel and the most brutal activities of a terrorist organisation. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that that false moral equivalence is always drawn by the enemies of Israel as a way to delegitimise the Jewish state? And does he share my concern with this move by the ICC, not just because of the succour that it gives terrorist groups elsewhere around the world, but the risks within it for ourselves and our own troops as they go about defending our interests around the world?
Well, my right honourable friend expresses himself, as always, with great lucidity. And I think it's very important that that message does not get sent. And that is why I repeated what Benny Gantz had said, and also in response to our honourable friend, who is no longer in his place, why I think that the sense of moral equivalence is repugnant.